Hello and welcome to the Horror Hangout, a podcast where film fans watch and ever talk about some of the best and worst horror films of all time, and then sometimes, such as this occasion, we get together with a filmmaker to talk about some projects that they're working on, some exciting ones. And today I am joined by my very special guest, Chad Michael Ward, a writer, director of a number of films, including Fairy Dust, which is in production right now. That's what we're going to talk about. Chad, how you doing?
How's it going?
Lovely for you to join us. Been excited to see you on the campaign trail. Obviously, in preparation for this, I had a cursory. We do our research over here, so I can see a wealth of credits to your name already in in several departments with your writing, directing, editing for a number of years. So you've been creating for some time, right?
Yes, yes, long time now. 20 plus years.
See, you say that a veteran with us here. Obviously, we're here talking about horror. You're here to scare people and drag them to the edge of their seats and, in a positive entertainment way, traumatize them. So, the first question I always ask when I'm meeting a director or a writer for the first time is, where did it all go wrong? Where did horror first infect you as a fan?
I think for me, I got infected early, very, very early. I grew up in the 70s and I remember Saturday morning, you had your Saturday morning cartoons. And as soon as those were done, our local channel played horror movies, like black and white horror movies, some stuff from the 70s. And I was always interested. I was like, okay, yeah, we watched the cartoons this morning. I was probably 5, 6 years old. And now I'm going to sit and watch this horror movie. And it never left. The movies got darker and gorier and scarier, more violent as cinema went on. And my interest just kept with it.
Can you think of, is there one or maybe a couple of movies or like a certain monster or anything that really sticks with you growing up that either fascinated or terrified you the most when you were a kid?
I think, I also grew up on Godzilla movies, and I think Godzilla as a monster sort of stuck with me. Frankenstein, obviously, is probably my favorite of the Universal monsters. And the one movie I, for whatever reason, just remember very specifically was Sisters with
Oh,
Margot
wow.
Kidder. For That was one of the movies they played out on that channel at that time, and to this day, just something about it. And I wouldn't even consider myself a fan of the movie now. I haven't watched it probably since I was a kid, but it just stuck. And then as I got older, I discovered Hellraiser. Obviously, that came out when I was in high school, and that was it. I think Hellraiser just cemented. My brain was already into horror, and Hellraiser was like, "Yep, this is what you can do with horror," and it was downhill from there.
Old Clive Barker has a lot to answer for, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
I mean, I don't want to skip over one of my favorite topics. You meet people and you think, oh, they seem like nice people. I'm sure we'd get on well. You've mentioned a love for Godzilla. I'm afraid, whether you like it or not, Chad, you and I are good friends now. Big Godzilla fan. We used to have Channel 4 used to run a creature feature at 11 p.m. on a Saturday, and me as probably says something about my parents. I'm sorry, mum and dad, you did your best. But I used to be allowed to stay up late and watch the start of them until I fell asleep, and then they would VCR them so I could watch them back the next day. Destroy All Monsters, The Terror of Mechagodzilla, Godzilla vs. Megalon is an underappreciated classic. When the new films will get to Megalon and the Undersea Kingdom of Seatopia and Jet Jaguar, I'm waiting for that day.
You and me both.
What a time we're in for. They will get there. They'll run out of content elsewhere eventually. They can
Exactly.
only mash him against King Kong a certain number of times.
Yeah, right.
So this moved on to you becoming a horror creative. You were working
Yes.
in the creative spaces. Where did that begin? Where did you start?
That's a really good question. Because I don't, again, it's always just been there. And I think when I started getting sort of the creative realm, obviously I was a big comic book fan, still am. I was reading a lot of like X-Men and Marvel comics. So I started in superheroes, I think, from a writing perspective, because writing was the first thing that I
Mhm.
got into. So it was a lot of superhero and heroic content and a little bit of adventure. And then eventually that writing turned into photography, still photography, editorials, fashion, erotica. Um, but it always had a dark bent. People would say, "Oh, your stuff is kind of dark. It's got this aesthetic to it." And I was like, "Well, yeah, I love horror movies, so of course it's going to bleed over." And then when it came time to go into music videos, which is where I started as a director. The first music video I ever was on as a still photographer was for Static X doing Queen of the Damned. So we
Wow.
Universal backlot, and then KMB Effects was doing the makeup. We had vampires on wires flying through the sky. I had never been on a set up until that point, and so being on set, seeing this go down, I was like, A, I want to do this, and B, I want to do this from a horror standpoint. And so yeah, so once I started doing music videos myself as a director, the very first one had demon women in it, torturing this poor man, and it just never quite got away from that. And then when it came time to do film, the first film that was pitched to me as a project that we could actually make was a horror project, and it wasn't something I had come up with, but was of course everybody said, "Yeah, you're the guy who does horror," even though I hadn't done horror film yet. They're like, "Yeah, no, you're the horror
You're the
guy.
horror guy.
Let's bring you on." And it's just been horror ever since.
Wow. I mean, what I've got some music videos to go back and check out after we've had our conversation here. I want to touch into those comic elements as well. I think horror in comics is a wonderfully rich genre, one that has perhaps been only semi-explored by the films we tend to get out of it. Even your mainstreams. I know I've been part of it myself. The independent comics and horror, there's some wonderful
Yes.
people working. We've had many of them on the show. We've discussed their work. But even in your mainstreams, your Marvels and your DCs even, there are some great horror content. As an X-Men reader, I almost feel like the comparisons to Aliens and Xenomorph are unfair, but I would watch an X-Men horror with the about the Brood.
Oh my God, I've been waiting for that film to come because
Yeah,
I'd love to see that happen.
I would. Yeah, that'd be brilliant. And technically, they haven't got to worry about legal so much anymore
Right,
because Disney
right.
own both of them. So you could have we could have a Brood
Yeah,
story in an X-Men film.
I think it'd be great.
You might be just the man for it, Chad. Listen up.
Good cross.
Listen up, fat cats. Get in touch with this guy.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So we've talked about how you got to where we are today. Let's get to our headliner today, right now, where we met and where you first hit my radar, Chad, was talking about your current project, Fairy Dust, which you're currently putting together. It's in pre-production and already such a wonderful aesthetic and so on. So, the synopsis that I have here is that a girl escapes to a dream world where she must protect everything she loves from being corrupted by darkness. That's the headline of this, right? A very evocative statement to begin with. Um, and before we even talk about the aesthetics and what you're hoping to create, I know reading the campaign there as well that this is a very personal story for you. So maybe you could tell the listeners a little bit about that. Like, what's your driver to tell this story?
So, Fairy Dust in and of itself isn't a horror movie per se, but as we've said, horror just keeps popping up. It just keeps sticking its head into everything I do. And so I started calling this a dark fantasy film. It's inspired by dark fantasy films like Pan's Labyrinth and Return to Oz and Mirror Mask. But but there's a lot of horror in it. I could not do it. So now I've started calling it a fantasy horror film because so much of the horror has shown up. Uh, but it started conceptually. I got a diagnosis about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now, for autism, which explained a lot about my past life and kind of how I've even arrived here as a creative, as a director, as a storyteller. And so when I was developing this story, I wanted to use it somewhat selfishly to tell my story, to explore what it meant to be sort of this autistic, neurodivergent outcast as a child in the 70s and the 80s, and the struggles that come with that and the rewards that come with that. And a lot of that had to do with make believe and becoming a writer and having these sort of fanciful stories in my head and these horror stories in my head. And you know Dungeons and Dragons obviously was huge in the 70s and 80s, and it was a good excuse to put some of those stories to play. And then running around the yard with sticks and fighting each other with the sticks, with my neighborhood friends. And so writing this story, it started with that. It was like, okay, so here's this outcast kid. How do we tell her story um, through an autistic lens because she herself is neurodivergent, and I wanted to capture that feeling. And it's nostalgia, and I think when you get to be my age, we tend to get very nostalgic for the past, and I'm definitely in that camp. And so, thinking back to the '70s and the '80s, and the comic books, the Dungeons and Dragons, the horror movies, all the just the big imagination, where the entire world outside of your small neighborhood could be a fantasy world, could be and a scary fantasy world because the outside world was scary, and that became the story. It was this girl has that same thing, and suddenly she's in a real fantasy world. It's no longer make believe. It's real, and the danger is real, the horror is real, and the rewards are real. And that was the groundwork that set this whole story up.
Wonderful. And I think this really ties into some of the discussions Ben and I have been having on the standard podcast when we're talking about a movie recently as well. Obviously, since the advent of Stranger Things and so on, that era, particularly the 80s, but the 70s as well, throwbacks and looking at those time periods through a lens of nostalgia has had some moments in the spotlight of late. But when we look at these things, especially of my age, when you can remember being in the 1980s as well, I think it is a stark difference between when someone is creating a story with a passion and a true fondness and a true understanding of what doesn't have to be even those eras, any era in the past was like that you're looking back at. You can tell the difference between a story that has been written and crafted with a true experience and a true grounding in that era versus it being a note that you got from the production company that said, hey, it is set in this period. Please include the appropriate number of needle drops so we can
Right,
dedicate that. Chuck a
right.
Teddy Ruxpin on the floor if you like, and we'll prove that that's there. So having a story that is truly based on the feelings and the aesthetic and the actual experience of being there, I think there is a great authenticity that can come across in these movies when they're done well. And when people say, "Oh, are people a little tired of throwbacks to this era?" It's like, no, they're tired of bad throwbacks to this
Yes,
era.
the
There will
stereo.
always be a fondness for a true story grounded in these eras, and all the backgrounds there you're talking about are such rich seams of inspiration. Very exciting stuff. I've also seen, I think this is where you probably went, where the dark fantasy evolved into the horror sense. Some of your conceptual aesthetics you put together, it looks like, now you've conjured the name Clive Barker, I can see the things he's done to you in your creative past. Um,
Yes.
you're really looking for something really striking imagery that you're putting together, and when you go into production, I imagine you're going to be terrifying people's psyches for a bit of time. Tell me about the aesthetics that you wanted to draw there.
So the aesthetics came before the film. How we got to the film started with the masks that are all in the conceptual photos that we've shot and posted up on our sites, which happened right around lockdown. Me and my partner were trapped in our apartment. I was still doing a lot of still photography. Uh, and for a photographer who needs somebody to photograph, suddenly we couldn't. There was nobody to photograph because nobody could come over. And so she at the time was doing some paper mache work and taught me how to do some paper mache. And it's like, well, hey, what if I make these masks and now we can turn you into any character you want to turn you into, and people, the internet won't be like, well, there you are shooting your partner again, and we've seen her face 100 times. Like, where's the new stuff? So we could make characters, and that was exciting. So I started working on those, made maybe 4 or 5 masks, and yeah, they were horrifying. They were weird, and we were putting all kinds of things like honey on them and gel just to get them to look wet and weird and gross. Um, and I realized I really, really enjoyed making these. It was just a whole aesthetic that borrowed heavily from where I came from and what I wanted to do, but also became its own thing. And part of it, I think, is I'm not an artist in that way, I've told people, oh, hey, can you design a mask that looks like this? It doesn't. I was like, I can't. These masks are whatever they turn into. I rarely have an idea ahead of time. It is just it's almost abstract painting in that way, where you start working on it, and then, a week later, you're like, oh, okay, that's what this is. All right, now I can kind of paint it up in the way that to sort of support what the mask itself has done. And so when it came time to write the film, we had taken these masks out. Once lockdown was over, we were able to go out into the world with the masks. And I had just bought a cinema camera. And I thought, well, hey, I've got to test out this camera. We've got these masks. Let's get up at the crack of dawn every morning and go out into the forest where the light's still good and just shoot some footage. Hey, walk from over here to over there. Okay, that looks cool. Walk up these stairs. Okay, that looks cool. And when we cut it together as a trailer, just for fun, everybody was asking, well, "What movie is this from? Is this a movie? Where is this from?" And it's like, well, it's not a movie. It's just footage. I just wanted to show off the masks, and that's when Andy Edwards, Thoridus' producer, stepped in and said, "Well, hey, do you have a script for this? Could this be a movie?" And I was like, well, I don't, but yes, it absolutely could be a movie, and that would be amazing to see these masks continue to grow, to continue to evolve, and now put them into a narrative. So we started writing on that, and that's the aesthetic was masks happened, and everything's written to support the masks, and that's where we landed with the aesthetic.
I love the sort of organic growth of this, and I think it's also worth celebrating as well. Like this is stuff that you see in, in horror and dark fantasy more than any other genre. The fact that you're part of this creative process. I've not met Michael Bay, but I'm sure I don't imagine that he spends time when he's picking up a new Transformers film thinking, right, how am I going to build this? Like, how am I going to get my hands on this and build those jagged metal pieces of a Megatron? No, it's like I'll ask the CGI guys to go away and do some brainstorming on that, and that's what I love about independent and horror and genre cinema in particular, the fact that you are in there with your hands in this stuff. And I know that as you go into production, there will be other people whose jobs are, exclusively making the wonderful props and the content and the visuals that we see. But having a creator that really is getting involved in that in the first place and an aesthetic that evolves is really appealing to me. And you've mentioned Andy Edwards, regular listeners to the show, will be familiar with that name and his face and voice. He's been on with us a few times. And he shares, I think, some of the that creative stuff. His recent film Rumpelstiltskin was,
Mhm.
I loved some of the aesthetics they put together for that, and also leaning into those dark fantasy elements too. So you've obviously found good company while you're working together there. Speaking of company, though, you have a lovely cast listed on the project. How have you gathered this weird and wonderful force of people to be working with some great genre names here? How has meeting this lot come together? How have you brought them into the cast that you have?
In all the ways that you're not supposed to. I literally just went on my social media and said, "Hey, we're making a movie. Here's a trailer, a concept trailer." And that concept trailer has bought me a lot of credit. Like that it speaks for itself and it draws a lot of attention. And so it helped because I said, "Hey, we're looking to cast. We're not casting the whole thing yet. We're looking for our leads. We're looking for a couple of the villains." And we got a pretty big response just from that, just from the social media, people sending in the backstage and their the UK one, Spotlight. No, is
Yeah.
it Spotlight? Spotlight. Their Spotlight pages, and so we started looking through everybody, and found Zoe, our lead. We found her very quickly, and had a chance to meet with her early on to discuss the role. And then from there, Andy obviously being on the part, just like, well, hey, you've got some other people that you might want to look at, that were in Rumpelstiltskin and had worked on some of their projects. So Josh Carter, who played Rumpelstiltskin, is going to be one of the main villains in our film. Annabella Rich, obviously, her and I had been talking. She's done some voiceover work for me on some other projects, so it made sense to bring her on here. And she plays a character named Miss Beatrix, who is wonderful. She's an absolute blast. And then Aviana Snow, who was also in Rumpelstiltskin and many other UK horror movies, is coming in to play one of our who I think is our scariest character, named Mother Ghost, and she probably has the winning scene out of the whole film in terms
Oh
of
wow, I shall look forward to that. We have something scheduled with her, but we had a conflict last time, so we need to get her back to join us another time. We've met Annabella. I first encountered her in Eating Miss Campbell. Has a wonderful balance of being able to do scary, but also like very funny as
yes.
well. And you mentioned Joss and Rumpelstiltskin. I think one of the highlight performances of that film, he does some wonderful like creature work. He really gets into those roles as
Yeah.
well. So I'm sure he's very nice. I've not met him, but he plays a good villain.
He does good villain work. Yes, yes, absolutely. And the beauty of the masks is that several of our actors will be playing multiple characters. There are a lot of masked characters that either they just don't have dialogue, they are just in the film. So like Joss is playing, I think, three or four different characters. Aviana is playing three different characters. So it's really fun to have them on production for a length of time. Sometimes, you bring in these wonderful people and they're only there for a day or maybe 2 days, and you don't get a chance to really build that connection with them that fast. But almost everybody will be on the full production because they are taking on these multiple roles, and I like that idea of having
That's
having
really
a
cool to get like sort of people that have diverse skills as well and that have good range. Good for them to be able to flex a few different muscles. And you, as
yeah
you say, you get to spend time with people because again, I talk a lot about this with independent horror creators. Obviously people's skills and talents are hugely important to any kind of production and what the finished product, finished movies look like. But there's also an awful lot to be said in any field, but especially I feel in creative fields, for having people around you that are nice and you like working with and are easy to work with, and that you have a good relationship with.
yeah
Like, it cannot be stated how valuable that is, right?
absolutely yeah
Oh, wonderful. Like it sounds like when you get into full swing of production, it's going to be a fun time. But of course, to get us there,
yeah
pre-production still happens. So right now you are running your campaign to gather funds from wherever they happen to come from. Investors of all levels, whether you want to back for a copy of the finished product, think of it as nothing more than a pre-order to buy a copy of that film, or people who are looking to invest more heavily for, associate producer credits and so on as well, or to have physical props and memorabilia afterwards. Tell us a little bit about the campaign.
So we launched the campaign last month, and we've got, I think, 3 more weeks on it. We are raising a portion of the budget from there. As with all independent film, we are pulling money from every corner of the world that we can. But the crowdfunder felt like it was a good chance to get started, sort of as our pre-production budget. So yeah, it's running live right now. We've got all kinds of perks, like you mentioned, pre-orders of the Blu-ray, digital copies, some producer credits. We are selling some of the masks, handmade masks that appear in the film, screenplays autographed by everybody in photos. We just launched as of this week for Pride Month, where we have an option to obviously get the movie itself, and a portion of those proceeds, 25% of those proceeds, will be donated to an LGBTQ charity. So
Nice.
some of the highlights.
Yeah, an important thing, especially again in the creative industries, we know what the LGBTQ plus communities, the huge role historically today have had in the production of so many of your favorite movies and politically around the world. These communities continue to be in a great deal of threat and strife, so it's really nice to see any positive actions we can see there as well. So whether you are excited about supporting a wonderful sounding film project, if I may say so myself, or supporting those communities as well, this is an area you can get involved in at all levels. So there is, you know, again, in this economy, times are hard for people, but if you can find an amount that you will not miss or an amount that is within your budgets, I'm sure you can, the team here will put it to good use. Um, I'm about to say we will do something, by which I mean your friend and mine, Ben Errington, will do something for us. The links and everything we will put in the notes to this episode. So on your platform of choice, if you have a look at those notes below, if you want a link to the campaign to see what perks might be for you, or if you want to get behind it and support it, you will find them just there. But if anyone wants to follow you for any other news directly, I mean, I'm happy to help out and share what we can on our platform. But if people want to follow you directly, Chad, where would they be best to follow along with you in the progress?
Well, I'm on everything. Chad Michael Ward at I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, still over on X, uh, TikTok. Search my name, you will find me everywhere.
Wonderful. We
I
shall,
post daily.
yeah, get those on there to keep a track on the progress. If it's something that you would like to lend your support to, then you absolutely can. That is going to be available for you. And let's get this film made. I am very excited to follow along with this story, but it's not the only thing you're working on. I think at time of recording, you're off to record a short next week. Is that right?
Next week we're just wrapping up our pre-production on a film called Desolation Heart. It's a short black and white sci-fi horror funded by the Swedish grant system, starring Agnes Bourne, who was last seen as Verena in The Witcher on Netflix.
Wow, there you go. So I saw some of your pictures even today. So you've been out looking at your locations, getting ready to shoot
Scouring,
next week, right?
yes, scouring the area for everything we can find to shoot at. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not part of the local film society, but you've got a rich seam of locations in Sweden to enjoy, I'm sure. But you ever exhaust all of those? We've got plenty over here in Scotland as well. You'd be welcome anytime. I'll get the beers in if you're doing the traveling. So feel
Excellent.
free to come and join us over here as well. I think we've got some lovely, bleak, desolate locations if you ever want to
My favorite.
come and film. I think there's some incredible scenes. I'm still blown away. If you haven't seen it, if you come for an interview, you come away with film recommendations. If you haven't seen Out of Darkness, which was filmed during the pandemic in the Highlands of Scotland with a tiny, tiny crew, some of the most wonderful and daunting location work I've ever
I
seen.
have seen it, and yeah, I had the same thought. Was how did they do that? How
Yeah,
did they?
incredible.
That landscape is looked very brutal.
Yeah, I heard the director do some speaking on it, and it sounded like it was a, let's say, a challenging physical challenge to get out there and get filming it, particularly when you're also having to manage around pandemic and distancing restrictions. But
Um,
you see every second of that hard work on in the film as well. Looking forward to seeing similar from the wonderful locations you've been finding. Um, Before I let you go, Chad, and get on with the day, I know it's a public holiday there for you there, so you get outside and enjoy it. But we couldn't have you on a podcast called The Horror Hangout without asking an important question about your experience of horror and hanging out and enjoying it in your personal life. So, as a film goer, I always have a suspicion of the answer when I talk to a director. Where is your What's your ideal situation to sit down and enjoy a horror movie? Are you a cinema guy or do you like the comforts of your own home?
oh, I'm absolutely a cinema guy. I do a fair bit of home watching. Obviously, I think in this day and age of streaming and Shudder and even Hulu, but any chance I get to go to a cinema to see something, I'm always there. We're very lucky to have an independent cinema here as well as a mainstream
Wow.
cinema.
Is there any film that you didn't get the opportunity to see, in the magic of a cinema itself that you feel is like the one that you would love to see on the big screen? Anything that you haven't been able to see historically?
Probably Hellraiser. I
Yeah.
saw that on VHS back in the day. Um, I feel like there's a lot of, or Nightbreed even, just Clive Barker movies in general. I don't know that I've ever actually seen the cinema. And I would love to go back and see a 35 millimeter print of that. I think would be gorgeous.
Yeah, that would be a wonderful opportunity. I always go to classic, like similar era of classics myself.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I've ever seen Jaws at a cinema. I can imagine that
Oh,
is
I have.
phenomenal.
It's
Um,
terrifying.
I really loved in the last year the 4K restoration of Nightmare on Elm Street is incredible on a big screen. We saw that
Ah,
at Fright Fest this year. It was
nice.
so good. It was only in that cinema size. I was like, oh, Nancy has a Sting and the Police poster up. Never, I never would have noticed that before.
Very
But I
cool.
think compared, and I know I'm in good company here, I think might be one of the most spectacular films I've seen at the cinema in the last couple of years. Props to the substance. I think that was incredible on a
Oh,
big screen,
yes.
but it will take a lot, I think, to overcome in recent years. Godzilla minus one at the cinema was huge.
Oh, I did not get to see that at the cinema. I wish.
Oh, add that to your list then. Like the sound work on minus one in particular
Yeah.
is you can feel it in there. It is incredible. If you get the chance to go to an IMAX and see minus one, especially now they've done that black and white remaster of it,
Yeah.
that would be phenomenal. Right there, Michael, as Chad, sorry, I'm reading your middle name here. The biggest question of all then, right? You're a horror creator, so the pressure's going to be on you from your friends and family, I imagine. You're hosting a horror night. You've got a mixed crowd coming around. Not all horror fans, some general audience members. They're coming around to you for a horror night. You're responsible. What film are you putting on for them?
Midsummer.
Mid,
Easily.
not missing a beat. Midsummer.
Midsummer. Midsummer. I mean, it's as a horror fan, it's really, really hard to nail anything down to one horror movie. There's so many eras of horror movies, different types of horror movies. But I think just in modern memory, I think Midsummer is something that has really affected it. And oddly, I saw it before I made the decision to move to Sweden, so I don't know
And you still
that
did.
influenced it, or but there's something about that film. I mean, obviously, Hereditary as well, but something about Midsummer is just there's just a visceral thing with it inside of me that has just stuck with me, and yeah, that's I will preach that one to anybody and everybody who's ever willing to listen. Be like, yep, this is what we're showing. This is what we need to see.
And given your location, would you arrange this horror movie party in one of the weeks where the sun doesn't go down?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, Midsummer is we're 2 weeks away from Midsummer here. I would love to host a Midsummer party on Midsummer. I think that would be amazing.
Well, if you are friends with Chad in the real world and you hear this around the time of release, you've got time to message him and say, right, let's do
Everybody
something
get
in a
up here.
couple.
Let's do it. Absolutely.
I'm gonna want pictures if this now ends up happening, Chad.
Exactly.
You guys all sitting around, save me a seat. Wonderful. So, Chad, thank you so much for
Thank you.
spending a little bit of time with me. As I said to everyone listening, check out the show notes if you want to take a look at the campaign or follow Chad on any platform of your choice to keep up with the progress of the film. Um, all that is remaining for me to say is to thank everyone for listening. Thank you to Taj Easton for our theme music. Thanks for our friends over at Acast and Rusty Quill for their association with us. And I will see you all next time. Thanks very much. Bye for now, everybody. Bye.
Bye.